When you think about the moments in life that make you want to shrink back, the decisions you made that you wish you could erase, or the opportunities you mishandled that you can never seem to forget, it can be easy to believe that you've disqualified yourself from God's love. From God's love. It can be easy to hear the voice of shame louder than the voice of mercy. But let me remind you today that the God we serve is not intimidated by your mistakes. His mercy is not just a band-aid for broken people. It is a flood that washes over every scar, every regret, and every wrong turn. His mercy is not reactionary. It is intentional. God already knew the moments where you would stumble. He already saw the places where you would fall short. And yet he still called you, still loved you, and still appointed you for destiny. That means there is no mistake powerful enough to cancel the purpose he has placed on your life. Some of you have been living under the weight of believing that your past defines you, that the chapter you got stuck in will forever be the title of your story. But the truth of God's mercy says otherwise. The truth of God's mercy declares that where sin abounds, grace abounds even more. The truth of God's mercy silences the enemy's accusations and covers you with the assurance that you are still chosen. You see, mercy doesn't just let you off the hook. It gives you a new hook to hang your future on. Mercy doesn't just erase the error. It creates space for you to become more than the sum of your failures. Think about Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times when Jesus needed him most. If we judge Peter by his mistake, he should have been disqualified from ministry, shut out from leadership, forgotten in the shadows of betrayal. But Jesus came back after resurrection and said, "Feed my sheep." He didn't look at Peter through the lens of his denial. He looked at him through the lens of mercy. That's what God does for you. He doesn't replay the tapes of your failures. He rewrites them with his compassion. He takes the places where you thought you ruined everything, and he turns them into reminders that his grace is sufficient. Some of you are waiting for permission to move on, waiting for someone to validate that it's okay to step out of the cage of regret. Hear me, God's mercy has already opened the door. Stop rehearsing what you did wrong and start rejoicing in the mercy that is pulling you forward. Stop defining yourself by what you lost and start declaring that mercy is giving you back more than you imagined. When you begin to embrace mercy, you begin to see yourself differently. You stop identifying as broken beyond repair, and you start realizing that you are redeemed beyond recognition. Mercy says you can still be used even if you were overlooked. Mercy says you can still be loved even if you walked away. Mercy says you can still be restored even if you were shattered. Mercy is not fragile, it's fierce. It hunts you down in the middle of your darkest night and reminds you that morning is still coming. Mercy walks into the prison cells of your guilt and unlocks the shackles with keys of grace. Mercy does not wait for you to clean yourself up. It meets you in the mud and lifts you higher. That is the mercy of God, and it will always be greater than your mistakes. Sometimes the hardest part is forgiving yourself. You've cried tears nobody else has seen, and you've replayed the what-ifs 1,000 times. But let me tell you this. If God himself, the creator of heaven and earth, has chosen to extend mercy toward you, who are you to deny it to yourself? Why would you continue punishing yourself for what God has already pardoned? Mercy is not about earning it. Mercy is about receiving it. It's about recognizing that your mistakes are real, but they are not final. Mercy always has the final word. So the next time shame tries to sit on your shoulders, remind it that mercy got there first. The next time guilt tries to whisper in your ear, remind it that mercy speaks louder. The next time you look at yourself and feel unworthy, remind yourself that mercy was never about your worthiness. It was about God's faithfulness. His mercy is not a second thought. It is a steady truth. And that mercy is not running out. It is new every morning. That means today, right now, in this very moment, you can rise again. You can step into the fullness of who God called you to be. You can let go of yesterday because mercy is giving you permission to embrace tomorrow. Don't let the shadow of your mistake block the light of God's mercy. Don't let the enemy trick you into believing that your destiny is canceled. God is not finished with you because his mercy is greater than your mistakes. There's something about the way God loves us that does not make sense to the human mind. People will count you out after one wrong move. People will place labels on you, box you in, and decide that you've reached the end of your potential. But God, he doesn't operate like that. God looks at your failure, and instead of stamping it as your ending, he breathes on it and calls it the beginning of something new. That's what a second chance really is. It is evidence that his love will not let you go. His relentless love says, I know you messed up, but I'm not done with you yet. I know you walked away, but I'll meet you on the road and bring you home again. I know you lost your way, but I'll be your compass until you find direction. A second chance is the love of God refusing to let your mistake have the final say. Think about Jonah. He ran in the opposite direction of his assignment, boarded a ship trying to hide from God, and ended up swallowed by a great fish. To most of us, that looks like the end of the story. How could God use somebody who ran away on purpose? Yet when Jonah prayed from the belly of that fish, God heard him. God didn't say, you're done. God didn't say you should have listened the first time. Instead, he gave Jonah a second chance to deliver the very message he had tried to escape. Why? Because God's love does not give up at the first sign of disobedience. His love is relentless, pursuing and stubborn in the most beautiful way. That second chance was proof that God was more committed to Jonah's destiny than Jonah was. Maybe you've been Jonah. Maybe you've run from an assignment, walked away from a calling, or sabotaged a blessing. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still standing, still being drawn back into the arms of God. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's relentless love pulling on you, refusing to let you drown in your mistakes. That's relentless love reminding you that even when you ran, he ran faster. Even when you hid, he found you. Even when you tried to close the chapter, he turned the page and kept writing. A second chance is not just another opportunity. It is a demonstration of God's character. It reveals his patience, his kindness, and his deep affection for his children. He is not a God who is quick to discard. He is not a God who sits with folded arms waiting to say, I told you so. He is a God who says, come closer. Let me show you that my love has no expiration date. The very fact that you're still here after all you've been through, after all the wrong turns you've taken, is evidence that his love has been relentless toward you. You didn't survive on your own strength. You survived because his love refused to let go. Think about the prodigal son. He wasted his inheritance, squandered his opportunity, and ended up in the mud, broken and ashamed. By human standards, he should have been disowned, cast aside, written off. But when he made his way back home, his father saw him from a distance, ran to him, and restored him with celebration. That wasn't logic. That was relentless love. That was a second chance, not because the son earned it, but because the father's love demanded it. And that's exactly how God loves you. He doesn't just give you a second chance because you proved yourself worthy. He gives you a second chance because his love cannot stop reaching for you. Some of you have been wrestling with the question, why would God love me after all I've done? And the answer is simply this, because he is love. It's not something he does occasionally. It is who he is. And because he is love, he cannot stop loving you. His love does not tire. His love does not run out. His love does not quit. That's why a second chance is not just mercy. It is evidence. It is evidence that you are held by a God who refuses to let your story end in shame. It is evidence that you are pursued by a God who refuses to let your potential die in the dark. I need you to understand this today. Your second chance is not a random accident. It's not an undeserved fluke. It is divine strategy. It is God saying, I love you too much to let this be the end of your story. It is God saying, you may have fallen, but I'll lift you again. You may have failed, but I'll use even your failure to shape you. Every breath you take is a second chance. Every morning you wake up is proof that relentless love has been watching over you all night. So don't waste this chance. Don't treat it like it's ordinary. Recognize it for what it is, the hand of God pulling you back onto the path of destiny. Recognize it for what it is, his relentless love showing up once again to say, I'm not finished with you. That's why you can trust him even now. That's why you can rise even after falling. Because every second chance you've been given is nothing less than proof that God's love will never stop pursuing you. There are some of us who walk around every single day carrying the weight of yesterday like it's a chain around our neck. We replay the same mistakes, the same heartbreaks, the same disappointments until they become a prison cell we live in. But I came to tell you today, your past is not your sentence. It is just a chapter. Your past is not your identity. It is only your history. And history is meant to be learned from, not lived in. The enemy loves to hold you hostage to what you used to be, hoping you'll never step into who God created you to become. But when you begin to understand that your future is authored by a God who makes all things new, you stop bowing to the lies of your past. Look at Moses. He was a murderer, a man who tried to bury his mistakes in the sand. If his past defined his future, he should have been forever remembered as a fugitive, unworthy of God's calling. Yet God met him in the wilderness, lit a bush on fire, and called him to lead a nation. Moses didn't get to define himself by his past because God had already defined him by his purpose. That's the same truth for you. Whatever you've done, whatever you've been through, whatever shame you've carried, none of it has the power to override God's plan for your life. You may have been divorced, but you are not defined by that divorce. You may have been addicted, but you are not defined by that addiction. You may have been rejected, abandoned, overlooked, or betrayed, but those labels do not define who you are becoming. God calls you chosen. God calls you redeemed. God calls you beloved. And his word over your life carries more weight than any wound from your past. The problem is we often confuse memory with identity. Just because you remember what happened doesn't mean you have to become what happened. Just because the scars remind you of the pain doesn't mean the scars determine your worth. In fact, the very scars the enemy wanted to use to shame you become the evidence of your survival. You're still here. You lived through what should have killed you. And the fact that you survived means there is more ahead than what is behind. Think about Paul. Before he became the apostle who spread the gospel, he was Saul, a persecutor of Christians. And his past was filled with blood on his hands, with choices that brought harm instead of healing. But when God interrupted him on that Damascus road, Paul had to choose. Will I let who I was stop me from stepping into who God is calling me to be? Paul's life is proof that your past cannot disqualify you from God's future. If God can transform Saul into Paul, he can surely transform your story too. Some of you have been allowing people to define you by the worst thing you've done, and it has made you doubt that you're worthy of stepping into anything greater. But hear this, people may remember your past, but God has already redeemed. People may remind you of where you fell, but God is the one who lifts you. People may whisper about what you did, but God is declaring who you are. You don't have to spend the rest of your life explaining or defending your past. You just have to walk boldly into the future God has written for you. You are not stuck. You are not too far gone. You are not disqualified. Your past is not the author of your story. God is. And God does not write tragedies for his children. He writes redemption stories. He takes broken beginnings and turns them into powerful testimonies. He takes what the enemy meant for evil and flips it into purpose. Every single painful chapter in your past can become a stepping stone to the future he has promised. And I know some of you are thinking, but you don't know what I've done. You don't know what I've been through. And you're right, I don't. But I know the God who does, and he still called you. He still chose you. He still has plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a hope and a future. If your past was powerful enough to cancel your destiny, you wouldn't still be here. The very fact that you're alive is proof that God is not finished with you yet. So today, I dare you to stop living under the weight of your yesterday. I dare you to stop letting the failures of your past keep you from stepping into the future God has prepared. Release the shame. Release the regret. Release the guilt. Because your past is not your identity. It is your testimony. And your testimony is going to set someone else free. The God you serve is not limited by what you've been through. He is a God who makes rivers in the desert and roads in the wilderness. He is a God who can take the very things you thought disqualified you and use them as the platform for your purpose. Your past is not the end of your story. It is simply the evidence that God has been preparing you for greater. And the best part is your future is not in your hands, it's in his. And if it's in his hands, you can trust that it's good. So lift your head, square your shoulders, take a step forward, because no matter what your past has looked like, your future is waiting, and it is brighter than anything behind you. There is something sacred about brokenness. We try to hide it, cover it up, and pretend we are whole when we are cracked wide open inside. We wear masks so no one sees the pieces of our hearts scattered on the floor. And what if I told you that your brokenness is not the end of you? It's the beginning of something greater. What if I told you that the very place where you feel shattered is the very ground where God is planting seeds of breakthrough? Brokenness is not a curse. It is an invitation. It is the invitation for God to step in and show you that what you cannot hold together, He can make new. Sometimes it takes breaking for us to finally surrender. As long as we think we're strong enough, we keep trying to fix it on our own. But when life hits us hard enough to bring us to our knees, we finally see that our strength is not enough. And it's in that moment when we have no choice but to release control that God begins His greatest work. Your brokenness creates space for God's glory. Your cracks make room for His light to shine through. Your weakness becomes the canvas where His power is perfected. Think about the woman with the alabaster jar. That jar represented her treasure, her value, her identity. But she broke it open at the feet of Jesus. And in that breaking, something beautiful was released. Her worship was poured out, her love was expressed, and her act of surrender became a testimony that still speaks today. The jar had to be broken for the fragrance to fill the room. And maybe that's why you've been broken, because there's a fragrance in you, a gift, a power, a calling that can only be released through the breaking. We want breakthrough without the breaking, but the truth is they often go hand in hand. Jacob wrestled with God until his hip was touched, and he walked with a limp for the rest of his life. His breaking was painful, but it birthed a new identity. No longer Jacob the deceiver, but Israel, the one who wrestled with God and prevailed. His limp became the evidence of his encounter. Sometimes your brokenness leaves you with marks that never fully go away. But those marks remind you of the moment God shifted your destiny. They are not signs of defeat. They are proof of breakthrough. I know it hurts. I know it feels like you'll never be whole again. But brokenness does not mean you are finished. It means you are being prepared. Just like a seed has to break before it can grow, you sometimes have to be broken before you can blossom. When the shell cracks, life begins to emerge. That's what God is doing you. He's using the pressure, the pain, the heartbreak to push you toward purpose. What the enemy meant to crush you, God is using to create you. Some of you have been asking, why me? Why did I have to go through this? Why did I have to lose so much? And while I don't have all the answers, I do know this. Brokenness is never wasted in the hands of God. Every tear you've cried, every piece of your heart that's been shattered, every disappointment you've endured, it is all material for your breakthrough. God is not just putting you back together the way you were. He is making you stronger, wiser, more compassionate, more powerful. He is shaping you into someone who can carry the weight of the destiny ahead. Brokenness humbles us. It strips us of pride and self-sufficiency. It makes us reach for God in ways we never would have if everything stayed perfect. And in that reaching, we discover that God has been reaching for us all along. You see, breakthrough is not just about doors opening or prayers being answered. Breakthrough is about your heart breaking open so God can pour Himself into places you once kept hidden. It's about discovering a depth of intimacy with Him you never knew was possible. The enemy thought breaking you would bury you. He thought the loss, the betrayal, the mistake, the trauma would be the end of you. But what he didn't know is that God plants His greatest work in broken soil. And what looks like a burial to the world is often just a planting in God's kingdom. You're not buried. You're planted. You are planted. And planted things don't stay underground forever. They rise, they grow, they bloom. Your breakthrough is coming and it's being birthed through your brokenness. So don't despise the breaking. Don't run from it. Don't let it convince you that you're too far gone. Instead, open your hands and say, oh Lord, if this is the breaking that leads to my breakthrough, then have your way. Because once you've been broken and God puts you back together, you will never be the same. You will walk differently, love differently, live differently. You will carry a strength that only comes from surviving what should have destroyed you. Your brokenness is not the end. It is the womb of your breakthrough. And when the time is right, you will see that every crack, every tear, every painful moment was preparing you for the glory that is about to be revealed in your life. Shame is a heavy chain. It doesn't just remind you of what you did. It tries to convince you that what you did is who you are. Shame whispers in your ear, you're not enough. You'll never be enough. You are your mistakes, your failures, your flaws. It tries to tattoo labels on your soul that God never put there. But I need you to hear me clearly today. Shame is not your identity. Shame may try to attach itself to your story, but it is not the author of your story. God did not create you to walk around with your head bowed low, chained to your past. He created you to walk in freedom, clothed in his righteousness, radiant in his love. Think about the woman caught in adultery. They dragged her out in front of Jesus, surrounded by people ready to stone her. She stood there exposed, humiliated, drowning in shame. And yet Jesus did not condemn her. He didn't even entertain their accusations. Instead, he stooped down, wrote in the dirt, and reminded everyone present that none of them were without sin. One by one, they dropped their stones. And then Jesus looked at her and said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." In that moment, shame lost its power. She walked away not defined by her mistake, but defined by the mercy of Jesus. That's what he does for you. He silences shame and covers you with grace. Some of you have been living like that woman before Jesus spoke, standing in the middle of your accusers, whether they're people around you or voices inside your head, feeling like you'll never escape the weight of what you did. But shame is a liar. It wants to keep you stuck in guilt so you never rise into grace. It wants you bound in regret so you never step into restoration. But Jesus came to set captives free, and that includes freedom from shame. He doesn't just forgive you, he restores you. He doesn't just cleanse you, he redefines you. He redefines you. He redefines you. Shame tries to make you hide. That's why Adam and Eve covered themselves in the garden after they sinned. But even then, God came looking for them. He clothed them, he covered them, he cared for them. That's how relentless his love is. Even when we run and hide, he pursues us. He calls us out of hiding not to expose us, but to heal us. He says, "Oh, who told you that you were naked? Who told you that you were unworthy? Who told you that you were disqualified?" Because those voices are not his. Shame may speak loudly, but it is not speaking truth. You are not your worst decision. You are not the pain you've endured. You are not the abuse you suffered, the addiction you battled, or the chapter you regret. You are who God says you are: chosen, redeemed, beloved, forgiven. And when you start believing his truth over shame's lies, you begin to walk in a freedom that cannot be taken away. The enemy loves to use shame as a weapon because he knows that if he can keep you bound in it, you'll never step fully into your purpose. But what the enemy forgets is that God turns shame into testimony. The very things you thought disqualified you become the evidence of God's grace. The very scars shame tried to hide become the marks that show others how far God has brought you. Shame says, hide it, but God says, use it. Shame says you're too dirty. God says, wash clean. Shame says you're not worthy. God says that you're already mine. I know shame feels real. I know it feels suffocating, but feelings don't define truth. God's word defines truth. And his word says there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. That means shame cannot stick to you unless you let it. You don't have to wear it anymore. You don't have to carry it anymore. You can lay it down at the feet of Jesus and walk away free. Some of you have been waiting for someone to come and tell you that it's okay to forgive yourself. So let me say it plainly. It's okay to forgive yourself. You don't have to keep rehearsing the guilt. You don't have to keep punishing yourself for what God has already pardoned. Shame loses its grip the moment you agree with God's truth about who you are. Lift your head, child of God. Square your shoulders. Breathe deep and know this. You are not your shame. You are not your sin. You are not your past. You are God's masterpiece, created with intention, loved without condition, redeemed beyond recognition. And when shame comes knocking at your door, reminded of this: I know who I am and I am not you. Shame may have tried to write your story, but God holds the pen and he is rewriting every chapter with grace. Walk in that freedom. Believe it. Receive it. Live it. Because shame is not your identity. Freedom is. Redemption is God's signature. It's his specialty. While the world looks at you and says, a too broken, too messed up, too far gone, God looks at you and says, a perfect canvas for my glory. Redemption is God stepping into the middle of your ashes and breathing beauty into them. It's him taking the ugliest parts of your story and flipping them into testimonies that touch lives. Redemption is not just about forgiveness. It's about transformation. It's about God saying, I will take what was meant to destroy you and use it to develop you. Think about Rahab, a woman with a reputation. By human standards, she should have been written off, forgotten, overlooked. but God wrote her into the story of salvation. She hid the spies, she trusted in God, and she ended up in the lineage of Jesus. That's redemption. God didn't erase her past. He redeemed it. He showed that no matter what others call you, when he calls you his, your whole story changes. God loves to take the underdog, the overlooked, the one who's been discarded, and raise them up as proof of his power. That's why you can't count yourself out. Because the very thing you think disqualifies you is often the thing God will use to qualify you. Your pain becomes your pulpit. Your scars become your sermon. Your mess becomes your ministry. Redemption is God's way of saying, our story isn't over. It's just getting good. Think about Joseph. Betrayed by his brothers, thrown in a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused, locked in prison. If anyone had a reason to give up, it was Joseph. But redemption was working behind the scenes. Every setback was setting him up for a greater comeback. By the time his story unfolded, he wasn't just a victim. He was a vessel. God placed him in a position to save the very people who had betrayed him. That's redemption. That's how God works. He turns betrayal into blessing, rejection into redirection, and pain into purpose. Redemption is not just a Bible story. It's your story too. You are not too far from God's reach. There is no pit so deep that his love cannot pull you out. There is no stain so dark that his blood cannot wash it clean. The enemy wants you to believe that your story is finished in failure, but God specializes in rewriting endings. He is the God who takes graves and turns them into gardens, who takes crucifixions and turns them into resurrection. He doesn't just restore you to where you were. He elevates you to where you never imagined you could be. I know sometimes it feels like too much has been lost, too much time, too many opportunities, too many mistakes. But with God, nothing is wasted. Every chapter you thought was ruined becomes material for his masterpiece. Every tear you cried waters the soil of your future breakthrough. Every wrong turn becomes the backdrop for his mercy. Redemption is not about pretending the pain never happened. It's about God proving that the pain cannot win. Look at Paul again, once a persecutor of Christians, then transformed into the greatest missionary of the gospel. His letters still shape the church today. That's redemption. That's God taking a man the world would have canceled and turning him into an instrument of eternal influence and eternal influence. If God can do it for Paul, he can do it for you. Some of you have been living as though the story is already over. You've accepted the lie that failure has the final word. But redemption means there is more ahead than what is behind. Redemption means the worst thing you went through can become the best testimony you carry. Redemption means God will use what you survived to set someone else free. You may not see it yet, but redemption is working. In the silence, in the waiting, in the moments where nothing makes sense, God is weaving threads of grace into your story. And when it all comes together, you'll look back and realize he never left you. Never left you. He was redeeming you the whole time. Don't count yourself out. Don't bury your future under the weight of your past. God is not done with you. In fact, he is just getting started. He delights in taking the broken pieces of your life and creating a masterpiece that leaves people in awe. That's what redemption looks like, God's glory on display in your story. So lift your head, child of God. You're not defined by the pit. You're defined by the promise. You're not stuck in the failure. You're standing in redemption. And when you open your mouth and tell your story, somebody else is going to see that if God did it for you, he can do it for them too. Because redemption is not just something God does, it's who he is. And he specializes in stories just like yours. Hope is powerful. It doesn't always shout, it doesn't always sparkle, and sometimes it doesn't even feel strong. But hope is what keeps you from drowning when the storms of life are raging. Hope is that quiet whisper that says, oh, don't give up. Something better is still coming. Better is still coming. Hope is the anchor that keeps your soul steady when the waves of disappointment try to toss you around. Without hope, she's heavy and directionless, but with hope, even in the darkest valley, you can keep moving forward. Hope is not denial. Not denial. It doesn't mean pretending everything is perfect when it isn't. Hope looks at the broken pieces of your life and still dares to believe they can be put back together. Hope doesn't ignore reality, but it insists that reality is not the final word. Hope fixes its eyes on God's promises, even when circumstances seem to contradict them. Hope says, yes, this hurts, but God is still good. Yes, I failed, but God still has a plan. Yes, I feel weak, but his strength is made perfect in my weakness. Think about the disciples on the boat when the storm was raging. The winds were howling, the waves were crashing, and they were terrified. But Jesus was in the boat with them. Hope wasn't the absence of the storm. It was the presence of Jesus in the middle of it. That's what keeps you anchored. Not that everything around you is calm, but that the one who commands the storm is with you. Hope doesn't always feel big. Sometimes it's just a decision to take one more step. Sometimes it's just a prayer whispered through tears. Sometimes it's simply choosing to get out of bed when despair tells you to stay down. Hope doesn't have to roar. It just has to hold. And when you cling to hope, even with trembling hands, you are declaring that the storm cannot steal your future. Hebrews tells us that hope is the anchor of the soul, firm and secure. An anchor doesn't stop the waves from coming. It doesn't prevent the winds from blowing, but it keeps the ship from drifting into destruction. That's what hope does for your life. It doesn't take away the trial, but it keeps you grounded in the truth that God is still faithful. It ties your heart to something greater than the chaos around you. Some of you have been tossed around by grief, loss, rejection, betrayal, and maybe you thought, I'll catch another hit. But look at you, you're still standing. That's hope. Hope has been holding you even when you didn't realize it. Hope is the reason you haven't quit. Hope is the reason you keep dreaming even after disappointment. Hope is the reason you keep believing even after the miracle seems delayed. When we lose sight of hope, we settle for survival. But God didn't call you just to survive. He called you to thrive. And hope is what bridges the gap between where you are and where He's taking you. It lifts your eyes above your circumstances and reminds you there is something worth pressing toward. Hope reminds you that delay is not denial, that pain is not permanent, and that failure is not final. Think about Hannah, who prayed year after year for a child. She could have given up, but hope anchored her in prayer. She poured her heart out to God, and in time, He gave her Samuel, a son who would become a mighty prophet. Hope anchored her through years of barrenness until breakthrough arrived. Your situation may look barren right now, but don't lose hope, because hope is what will carry you until your promise is birthed. The enemy wants to rob you of hope because he knows that a hopeful heart is unstoppable. He knows that as long as you believe God still can, you will keep moving forward and move forward. So he tries to bury you under discouragement, under shame, under fear, but hope rises. Hope refuses to die. Hope says, I will wait on the Lord. I will trust His timing. I will keep walking until the promise unfolds. You may feel weary. You may feel like your hope is hanging by a thread. But let me tell you something. God can work with that. He doesn't need you to have unshakable faith every second. He just needs you to keep holding on. Even a flicker of hope can light up the darkest night. Even a mustard seed of faith can move mountains. So let your hope anchor you today. Anchor you in the truth that God is not finished with you. Anchor you in the promise that He works all things together for good. Anchor you in the confidence that joy is coming in the morning. You may bend in the storm, but you will not break, because hope is holding you steady. Keep moving forward. Keep believing. Keep hoping, because the God who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. And hope will be the anchor that keeps you standing until you see it come to pass. When God gives you a second chance, He doesn't just patch up the old. He makes all things new. He doesn't recycle your brokenness. He recreates you with fresh purpose, fresh strength, and fresh vision. The world may only offer you reminders of your failures, but God offers you restoration that wipes the slate clean. He says, oh, behold, I am do a new thing. Do you not perceive it? That means even while you're still standing in the ruins, God is already building something brand new. Second chances are not about going back to what was. They're about stepping into what can be. God doesn't want to restore you to the same place where you fell. He wants to raise you higher, stronger, wiser, more resilient than before. Think about Peter. He denied Jesus 3 times. By all accounts, his ministry should have ended in shame. But when Jesus rose from the dead, He didn't disqualify Peter. He restored him. He asked him 3 times, do you love me? And each time Peter said yes, Jesus reaffirmed his calling. That's the God of second chances. He didn't just forgive Peter. He launched him into leadership. He made him new. That's what God does with us. He doesn't just let you back into the race. He gives you a fresh pair of running shoes, new stamina, and a clearer track to run on. He turns your setback into a setup for something greater. He He doesn't just repair the cracks in your heart. He gives you a new heart with new desires and new courage. That's why the Bible says if anyone is in Christ, they are a new creation. Old things have passed away. All things have become new. Some of us live with shame like it's a permanent tattoo. How we replay our mistakes, our regrets, our failures, thinking they're engraved into our identity. But God specializes in erasing labels. Where the world calls you a failure, he calls you a forgiven. Where the world calls you a broken, he calls you a beloved. The world calls you too late, calls you a right on time. The God of second chances is not interested in defining you by your past. He's committed to redefining you by his grace. When God makes things new, it doesn't always happen overnight. Sometimes it feels slow, like watching seeds in the soil. But don't mistake the process for absence. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't happening. Transformation takes time. Healing takes time. Renewal takes time. But God is faithful, and if he promised to make it new, he will finish what he started. Look at the woman at the well. She came with her shame, her failed relationships, her reputation. She was used to avoiding people because of her past. But when Jesus met her, he didn't condemn her. He gave her living water. He gave her a second chance at dignity, at faith, at hope. She left that well a new woman. The same woman who was hiding from people ran back into the town proclaiming, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did." That's the power of a second chance. It turns shame into testimony. It turns hiding into proclaiming. It makes all things new. God is not intimidated by your broken pieces. He is not surprised by your failures. He is not disgusted by your mistakes. He looks at you and sees the person he created you to be, not the mistakes you've made. That's why his mercies are new every morning. Every single day is a new chance to rise, to try again, to trust again, to love again. The God of second chances doesn't just restore what was lost, he multiplies it. Job lost everything, his family, his health, his wealth. But when God restored him, he didn't just give him back what he had. He gave him double. That's what happens when God makes all things new. He doesn't just give you back the same story. He writes a better one. Some of you have been living in the shadow of your first chapter, afraid to turn the page because of what went wrong. But God is saying, I'm writing something new. Don't get stuck in yesterday when I've got tomorrow waiting for you. You don't have to relive your mistakes. You don't have to settle for surviving. You don't have to carry the weight of what could have been. The God of second chances is still in the business of resurrection. If he can raise Jesus from the dead, he can raise your hope, your dream, your purpose, your life. So don't cling to the ashes when God is offering you beauty. Don't cling to the ruins when God is building a palace. Don't cling to the guilt when God is offering you grace. The God of second chances is extending his hand right now, saying, let me make it new. Lift your eyes, child of God. What you lost is not greater than what God is about to restore. What broke you is not stronger than the one who is rebuilding you. What you thought was over is only the beginning. The God of second chances makes all things new, and that includes you.